By now, we've seen how Ethiopian Airlines established itself as Africa's leading carrier. The airline's leadership unveiled their master plan in two phases that seemed impossible to most observers. First came Vision 2025, launched in 2005 with ambitious targets to expand the fleet, grow global routes, establish regional hubs across Africa, and invest heavily in cargo, maintenance, and training facilities. The skeptics watched and waited for the inevitable failure that plagued so many African airlines, but it never came. Ethiopian achieved every target of Vision 25, 8 years ahead of schedule. But Vision 2025 was just the beginning. At the end of 2022, Ethiopian Airlines launched Vision 2035, a 10-year roadmap so audacious it would make even the world's largest carriers pause. The plan aims to position Ethiopian among the top 20 most competitive aviation groups, not just in Africa, but globally. The numbers are staggering. Passenger traffic should quadruple from 17 million to over 60 million. The fleet should nearly double from 140 aircrafts to 271 of various sizes and models. International destinations should expand to cover over 200 airports worldwide. And, most ambitious of all, annual revenue should reach $25 billion. That's more than tripling from the $7 billion achieved in fiscal year 2024. Ethiopian Airlines understood something that many of its competitors missed. Africa's aviation problem isn't about planes, but connecting a fragmented continent. Historically, travelers between African cities often had to transit through European or Middle Eastern hubs, a reality that still keeps Africa disconnected from itself. The solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Establish multiple operational hubs across the continent, each serving as a gateway to different regions while feeding traffic back to the primary hub in Addis Ababa. This multi-hub strategy would extend Ethiopia's reach far beyond what any single airline could achieve. The Bole International Airport served as the cornerstone of this strategy, allowing Ethiopian to efficiently connect East, West, and Southern Africa with Europe, the Americas, Asia, and the Middle East. The airport was already serving over 20 countries with direct intra-African connections, but this was just the foundation. In Togo, they partnered with Sky Airlines to create a West African hub in Lomé. In Malawi, they established operations in Lilongwe, and Zambia's capital, Lusaka, became another strategic point in their network. Each hub carefully chosen to maximize coverage and minimize overlap, creating a web of connectivity that would make Ethiopian indispensable to African travel. This multi-hub strategy requires more than partnerships. It demands a massive infrastructure investment, which the airline is happily doing. Ethiopian announced plans for a new aviation city airport. This $5 billion project is set to open in 2029 with an initial capacity of 60 million passengers annually, eventually expanding to handle more than 100 million passengers, making it the largest hub in Africa, comparable to major global hubs like Dubai and Istanbul. The scale is unprecedented for an African airline. While continental competitors struggle to maintain single hub operations, Ethiopian is building a continental network that would make it nearly impossible for rivals to compete on reach and connectivity. The airline figured out a formula that allows rapid expansion while maintaining control, a strategic minority ownership combined with operational management. It typically secures a 49% stakes in partner airlines, allowing host governments to maintain majority ownership, while Ethiopian provides the expertise, training, and systems that make the partnership actually work. The approach is brilliantly calculated. National airlines are often seen as symbols of sovereignty and pride, making governments reluctant to cede majority control to foreign entities. By taking minority stakes, Ethiopian appears to respect national sensitivities while securing the operational control necessary to execute their expansion strategy. In Togo, Ethiopian holds a 40% stake in Sky Airlines and managed its strategic and technical operations, with an Ethiopian executive serving as managing director. The model is replicated across the continent. 49% shares in Malawi Airlines and Air Congo, as well as a 45% stake in Zambia Airways. Perhaps the most ambitious partnership to date is the agreement with South Sudan, who gave Ethiopian Airlines the responsibility to establish and operate a national carrier. Signed in 2023, this Memorandum of Understanding include technical support, training, operational management, and even managing South Sudan's airspace, which is transitioning from Sudanese control. The joint venture strategy wasn't without its failures. Efforts in Nigeria and Ghana faced significant backlash from local carriers and were ultimately unsuccessful. But the successes far outweighed the setbacks as each partnership extends Ethiopian's network. To match these ambitions, the fleet expansion and the training were central to everything. The company invested heavily in education and technical capabilities in the renowned Ethiopian Aviation Academy, which provides high-quality training across the continent. But as Ethiopian Airlines' influence expands across Africa, competitors and governments are starting to grow increasingly uncomfortable. In September 2024, Ethiopian Airlines suspended flights to Eritrea after the local government accused the company of malicious trading practices and tried to block its operations. The dispute reflects deteriorating political relations between the two countries following the Tigray War and Ethiopia's renewed push for Red Sea port access. Somalia is another flashpoint. In August 2024, the Civil Aviation Authority threatened to suspend all of Ethiopian Airlines flights over sovereignty issues. This accusation is tied to broader geopolitical tensions, but mostly, again, Ethiopia's port access efforts. Despite its stellar reputation, these sanctions point to a growing scrutiny of the airline's operations across the continent. The slow implementation of the single African air transport market also reveals a deeper resistance to Ethiopia's expansion. The existence of 54 different civil aviation authorities and a lack of political will cripples harmonization efforts. But the underlying concern is clear. Many African countries fear that liberalization would allow Ethiopian Airlines to dominate their markets. And since they are all trying to establish or revive their national carriers, a stronger competition goes against their interests. Rival airlines were the first to voice concerns about what they perceived as an unfair competitive advantage. Kenya Airways, once a dominant regional player, watched the capacity gap with Ethiopian Airlines widen significantly since the turn of the century. Industry insiders claimed that Ethiopian benefited from no income tax and low labor costs. These advantages allowed the company to operate at cost levels that other African carriers can't match. Some industry observers even went as far as describing the airline as a kind of colonizer, all because of the perception around its joint venture strategy, extending the airline influence while partners feel like subsidiaries. This sentiment has significantly contributed to the failure of partnerships in Nigeria and Ghana, where local carriers successfully mobilized against Ethiopian's expansion plans. But despite all of that, Ethiopian has established itself as Africa's undisputed aviation leader, leaving its competitors struggling in its wake. The numbers tell this story of dominance very well. With over 150 aircrafts in its fleet, Ethiopian Airlines dwarfs its nearest competitor, Egyptair, which operates 65 aircrafts. Kenya Airways, once considered a major rival, has 35 aircrafts, while South African Airways has been reduced to 20. This fleet disparity translates directly into market dominance. The pushback of governments and aviation authorities is rooted in protectionist policies that characterize much of African aviation. Many countries view their national carriers as symbols of sovereignty and national pride, leading governments to prioritize their protection over commercial viability and market liberalization. Ethiopian Airlines itself operates with deep protection from its government at home, making it difficult for foreign airlines to secure landing rights. Kenya exemplifies this protectionist stance perfectly. Local authorities regularly impede non-Kenyan carriers by not allowing overflight or imposing lengthy permit processes for charter flights, sometimes even citing security reasons. Despite agreements which aim to liberalize African skies, progress remains sluggish. And all the while governments and regulators push back against Ethiopian's expansion, passengers are now starting to voice their own complaints. The discontent centers on three main issues: high fares, poor service, and perceived lack of competition. Intra-African flights are among the most expensive globally, significantly hindering trade, business, and travel. We have a whole episode about the how and why Africans pay more to fly. The reputational damage from regulatory sanctions and widespread passenger complaints directly challenges Ethiopian Airlines' reputation for operational excellence. While the airline continues to receive awards, including Best Airline in Africa for 7 consecutive years, these incidents threaten to erode public trust and perception. The airline stands at a crossroad where its continued dominance depends not only on its internal strengths, but also on its ability to navigate and mitigate these complex external pressures. But facing that pressure, Ethiopian Airlines doesn't retreat. It doubles down with a sophisticated public relations offensive. The airline began aggressively highlighting its exceptional performance, showcasing all of its accolades, a strategic move to reinforce its reputation for excellence. Then the messaging became increasingly pointed toward its financial independence, a direct counterpoint to criticism about state support, positioning the airline as a model of commercial discipline rather than government dependency. The company also showcased its humanitarian efforts, particularly how it had converted passenger planes to cargo carriers during the pandemic to transport essential goods across Africa and South America. By presenting itself as the new spirit of Africa, Ethiopian Airlines positioned its growth not as corporate expansion, but as African integration. But something unexpected began to happen across the African aviation landscape. Instead of simply complaining about Ethiopia's dominance, governments and competitors started taking concrete steps to level the playing field through collaboration and regulatory reform. In that scenario, Qatar Airways emerged as a significant player, making strategic investments in African airlines that directly challenged Ethiopia's expansion strategy. The airlines acquired a 25% stake in South Africa's Airlink and now holds a 60% stake in Rwandair, leveraging Rwanda's liberal approach to foreign ownership. This partnership is positioned to boost Rwandair's financial strength and potentially block competition from Ethiopian Airlines. As a whole, the regulatory environment started to shift toward promoting private sector participation, and the East African community began exploring cooperation possibilities, including aligning schedules, joint procurement of aircraft and spare parts, shared maintenance and training facilities, as well as various codeshare agreements. As the dust settles, Ethiopian Airlines' dominance remained intact, but the landscape around it has fundamentally changed. The airline continues its aggressive expansion, forging new strategic partnerships like its joint business agreement with Etihad Airways. What do you think? Is the dark side of Ethiopian Airlines worth the concern, or is it overblown?